So the Chiefs general manager Brett VEACH spoke to the media today, and he gave us quite a bit of information about their draft plans.
Probably safe to say, you guys know I always give you probably too much information on these Zooms.
Well, I'm not complaining, and in today's video, I'll break all that down and give you context and every key takeaway I could find from his 40-minute presser. But first, all right, ladies and gentlemen, buckle up because Chiefs general manager Brett VEACH spoke with the media today for about 40 minutes, and there was a ton to take away from all that he said. In fact, he said pretty early on that he probably gives a bit too much away in these interviews, but I like it because we can basically see the blueprint for the Chiefs regarding their draft plans. I mean, if you look at the roster as a whole, I could have told you before this interview, some positions they were for sure going to be drafting, but when you marry those thoughts with how Brett VEACH's team sees the draft position group by position group based on what he said today, the picture is now much more clear. VEACH said every offseason the goal of the team is the same. You want to build the most talented roster you can, but you have to go about it differently each and every season because it's very unique. So yeah, they want to put together the best roster they can and also as creatively as they can given the financial restrictions and free agency to help allow them to hopefully take the best player available at each round of the draft and not have to reach out of desperation. He always looks at the trenches as very high priority, and so Jalen Moore was brought in during free agency because of the obvious. They needed some stability at that left tackle position. Sure, he's only started 12 games in his NFL career, but when you consider the fact that he did play behind a future Hall of Famer in Trent Williams, that certainly helps things quite a bit. They also liked how he looked last year when he filled in for Trent Williams after he went down to injury, and the hope is he continues the upward trajectory of that level of play and builds upon it. On the subject of the offensive line, Joe Thuney is sadly now gone, with VEACH adding they were gutted to have to make that trade, but you have to make tough decisions like that from time to time in free agency. He then mentioned that they liked what they saw from Kingsley at left guard. His start versus Denver Week 18 looked pretty promising as an option there. Regardless, they'll never stop looking to add to that in the draft. O-line, D-line, the trenches are the most important. And regarding Trey Smith, hopefully they get a long-term deal done. VEACH said they had a long talk with his agents at the Combine, as well as the owners' meetings, also chatting through multiple phone calls and emails with them. Once the draft is over, VEACH said they will shift priorities back to trying to get something done long-term before that July 15th deadline.
I'm sure once things settle down on both ends, we'll be in a position to continue this dialogue and hopefully make some progress there, but there's no secret there. We'd like to get Trey locked up.
He then said after Trey Smith and his deal hopefully gets done, at some point they will have dialogue with both Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis. They are on the last year of their deal, but if you want to pick up their fifth-year options, you only have until May 1st. That's like 2-ish weeks away, so you don't have a long time to get that figured out. He did say those are two great players you want to see in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform for years to come, and those are two premium positions, and those are two position groups they do also like in this year's draft. Before I get to that, though, they added another cornerback in free agency, Christian Fulton, with VEACH noting you can never have enough good corners, especially the way Spags likes to run his defense. Last year, they traded away L'Jarius Sneed and dealt with injuries at the position from multiple players, so bringing in a cornerback like Fulton made a lot of sense. They liked him a lot coming out in the draft, and he ended up going a few picks before the Chiefs ended up selecting linebacker Willie Gay. So VEACH made it seem like had Fulton been there, he was a definite player they would have considered drafting, which I found pretty interesting. And he's here now. Another position group that dealt with injuries was the running back room, and someone they are high on is running back Elijah Mitchell that they signed in free agency. Mitchell reminded VEACH in similar ways to Jerick McKinnon in the sense of skill set, but also the injury history. In regards to skill set, he has a similar explosiveness, great hands, and when healthy, provides an explosive dynamic in both the run and pass game. If you remember, McKinnon actually didn't play 2 seasons in a row due to back-to-back season-ending knee injuries. He missed all of the 2018 and 2019 seasons. Then he played his last year with the 49ers in 2020 and came to KC at the age of 29 years old, playing a few solid seasons and staying pretty healthy for the most part. Well, Elijah Mitchell has the chance to have a solid year in KC after missing all of last year, with VEACH saying the training staff liked what they saw out of him as he bounced back from rehabbing through that hamstring injury that did cause him to miss the entire 2024 season, and the success they had with McKinnon bringing in a guy that struggled to stay healthy and having pretty good success with him did play a bit of a factor in them being willing to try that again with Elijah Mitchell. All right, real quick, I want to shout out a couple ways you can support the channel. You can get some HBTC coffee of Benchwarmer Brew. This has got origin notes of Mexico and Ethiopia, a smooth medium roast, and it is one of the most popular blends of the lineup. Then you can also snag some HBTC merch. We've got Dad Bod Season, X Factor in honor of Dante Hall, mixed with Xavier Worthy, of course, and much more. Links to both the coffee and merch are in the description down below. And with that, they set their eyes on the draft, being in a place where they hope to be able to simply take the best player available, though of course there are some obvious needs. VEACH noted that they want to add to the trenches and at corner, with the draft having numbers there at each of those positions. The O-line numbers are down a tick, specifically along the interior, but there's a lot of depth at the D-line position, especially defensive ends. He then said outside of running backs, defensive end is probably the deepest position from a talent perspective all down the line every single round. When looking at round one, though, the true first round grades they have on players are down this year. They have around 12 to 13 true round one grades, whereas some years it's been as high as 19. So a bit lower this year, but if one of these players were to fall within striking distance, they will explore the possibility of aggressively moving up to get him. Not too aggressively, but if they fall into the 20s, that's a good range to try and move up like they did for Trent McDuffie back in 2022. He insinuated, though, that they probably wouldn't move too far up because the higher up they go, the more draft capital it requires, and they need the picks this year. The trenches, the secondary, and the receiver room. So it doesn't make sense to give up multiple picks when you need to address several position groups along the roster. So yeah, moving up is an option, but I don't think we see them moving up into the teens or anything crazy like that. Let's say this scenario plays out. The board falls in a way where they just opt to stay put at 31, or maybe they try to trade up and they can't find a trade partner. VEACH said they felt like they put themselves in a place where they could just take the best player available at pick 31, and he actually mentioned 4 position groups specifically there at pick 31, or maybe via a small trade-up. Offensive line, defensive line, cornerback, and receiver, saying, quote, "We'll see how it all shakes out." Well, I think it's safe to say we see them take all of these position groups in the draft. The question is, when exactly? What he said next, though, actually made my eyebrows raise way the heck up.
I think if a guy we really like does fall into the 20s and it's reasonable, I think we'll be aggressive. Otherwise, I think we'll be happy with adding players at each round and multiple players in 3.
I want you to listen to that part again.
We'll be happy with adding players at each round. And
I swear he almost said left tackle. It was probably not exactly that, but we all know everyone and their mother is mocking a left tackle to KC at pick 31, so it did make me go, regardless. He said if they don't have a guy that falls that they have a true round 1 grade on, they are comfortable with getting quality players in the first, second, and multiple in the third, and then he sadly cut out when he was asked about the possibility of adding a left tackle in the draft, like his interview literally froze for like 90 seconds. They did sign Jalen Moore, yes, but before he cut out, VEACH said they are always looking to add to the trenches. Depth is important in case injuries happen, and then Jawan Taylor is reaching the end of his contract as well. Basically, an offensive tackle being drafted is absolutely on the table here. I found this part pretty interesting as well. While VEACH said that they had fewer true round 1 grades this year, 12 to 13 rather than up to 19 in previous drafts, they do have higher numbers on guys they like in the early second round. Well, that made me think there's a definite possibility KC could trade out of round 1, allowing a team that maybe wants a quarterback late in the first to go up and get that guy, so they have the flexibility of using a 5th-year option down the road on that player. Well, I think it's a real possibility, especially when you consider the fact that after their single 4th-round pick 133, they don't have another one until the 7th round at pick 226. So I could definitely see a scenario playing out where all their true round 1 grades are gone by the mid-20s, and maybe they also couldn't find a trade partner, so they opt to trade back into the late 30s to get another 4th or more than likely a 5th or a 6th, so they don't have to go so long between picks in that range. VEACH said he does prefer to be aggressive there in round 1, i.e. moving up, but based on how the grades are landing this year, it could make sense to trade out of round 1, but his answer was sort of, we'll just have to see. I mean, with Felix Anudike-Uzomah a couple years ago, they tried to trade up. They couldn't find a partner. They then tried to trade out of round 1, but said they couldn't get an early enough pick in round 2. They didn't want to move that far back into the second round, so they opted with the best player available on their board also combined with a position of need, and they ended up going with defensive end Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Then regarding cornerback, a position of need for KC, especially considering all the pieces back there on the last year of their rookie deals, he noted there's sneaky depth in the mid-rounds this year. There's not as many high-end guys as years past, but rounds 2, 3, and the beginning of the 4th could be a logical spot to look into a corner there if the right guy falls. But then they are also always in the mindset to add players they had graded as impact players, and certainly wouldn't shy away from continuing to add to the wide receiver room as well to stack up some talent for Patrick Mahomes. He also mentioned that they thought they were stacked at the wide receiver room last year and injuries hit that room, so you can never have too much quality depth there. He then brought up the running back class, calling it the deepest position group of the draft, and said you can get a really good player there rounds 1 all the way to round 5. He went on to talk about injuries that hit the running back room last year. We know it hit the wide receiver room, but Pacheco was out for most of the season. Kareem Hunt was basically signed off the couch and was playing catch-up all season long. That's why even with Kareem Hunt, Elijah Mitchell, Isaiah Pacheco, and Carson Steele on the roster right now, at least the perceived to be guys that make the roster, they will probably draft a running back. In fact, VEACH basically guaranteed it.
There's a ton of running backs, and I think that there'll be a good chance that one of these picks ends up being one of those players, just because there's so many of them and they're all really good.
Well, I sure hope they can get a guy they really like in the 3rd or the 4th round at the latest, a true difference maker given the depth of the class. VEACH also mentioned the new kickoff rules and the return rates are going to be increasing. They recently moved kickoffs from the 30 to the 35, and this is what he had to say, quote, "Ideally, it would be advantageous for us to identify a receiver and or running back that has explosive playmaking ability on both ends. Talent from top to bottom, but also the ability to play on special teams is, of course, the ultimate goal here." All in all, he never feels like the roster is 100% where it needs to be, which is why from the start of free agency to the draft and later, think trade deadline when they traded for D-Hop and the waiver wire during the season, he's always looking to improve the roster based on what happens. For this draft, specifically though, this year, he said this.
O-line, D-line, and corner. I think the draft has some numbers. I think everyone has talked about the depth in the draft at the defensive line position, in particular defensive end. And then I think corner does have some sneaky depth there in the middle of the draft class.
So 2 defensive tackles, a defensive end, 2 corners, a running back, a few offensive linemen, and a partridge in a pear tree. I think some of that has been addressed in free agency. So I'm not saying you'll see that many of each position group actually drafted, but I think it's safe to say this is somewhat the blueprint of the majority of positions plus wideout that will most likely end up getting drafted here. He did mention receiver a few times in his presser, and then again, think about this, only Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice are under contract after this season, and when you look at the wideout room and if injuries happen, you could definitely add to the room there. So there you go. O-line, probably a tackle is on the radar pretty early, but if the top guy falls, maybe they go defensive tackle, defensive end, corner, or wide receiver sooner rather than later. Running back will have solid guys rounds 1 through 5, so I'm sure they take one within that range there. And corner has solid guys rounds 2 through 4, and then with defensive end being very deep, maybe that means they try to take a guy a bit later on and still believe he could be a quality contributor sooner rather than later. They do have 4 players in the top 100, so in a perfect world, you get playmakers, guys that can contribute within a year or 2 in the system, rotate in year 1, but then maybe even start after that. And that could be an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, a wide receiver, and then a corner or running back. Those top 4 picks, that would be a pretty good win in my eyes. But hey, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on your main takeaways from VEACH's presser and the direction you think they could go based on what he said and how he described this draft class. And until next time, let's freaking go. How about those?